Hey, welcome back to Music Theory Logic. My name's Andrew, and today's going to be another music theory breakdown. And today is one I'm super excited about. We're going to look at Tommy's Theme by the drum and bass pioneers, Noisia. Let's go ahead into our logic session. So if you're not familiar with Noisia, you should definitely go check out their music. As I mentioned, they are pioneers of drum and bass. They were also integrally involved in sort of the 2010 boom of dubstep. Legend has it they taught Sonny Moore or hosted him while he was making Scary Monsters. Absolute legends. There's all sorts of great content to learn from Noisia out there. There's a future music video they did, multiple different future music videos about their production style. But if you haven't seen one of these before, again, I've created all the instrumentals. The sounds I had to build for this track because essentially Noisia builds their own sounds. It's not perfect, but I'm pretty proud with how close I got it in the amount of time I spent. Here is Tommy's Theme. We're going to talk about the music theory afterwards, where these notes come from. I'll break down each layer. Without further ado, here's my rendition of Tommy's Theme. Cool. I'm going to go ahead and stop it there. I'm going to cover some other parts of the song a little bit later. Hopefully you enjoyed that. If you're familiar with the track, hopefully you think it's close enough to keep watching. Again, my main goal is to get all the notes right so we can talk about music theory and the layering and the sort of stuff that's going on in the song so that you can better understand music you like or music you're making. So this song, Tommy's Theme, is predominantly in the key of C sharp harmonic minor. That's a fancy way of saying C sharp minor with a raised seventh tone, a seventh scale tone. So from the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that note is raised in natural minor. It would be one note below. All right. C sharp minor has these following notes. C sharp minor is relative major is E major, for those of you that are more familiar with major scales. So we've got C sharp, D sharp, E, F sharp, G sharp, A. In the natural minor, it would be a B. In our harmonic minor, we're going to call this B sharp, even though it's a C. Then we're going to have a C sharp. So the reason we would call this note C sharp is just because the way we talk about scales, one rule is that we always have one of every letter in these full 7-tone scales. So it makes it a lot easier when you're thinking about the music, and the more you do this kind of stuff, the more that will make sense. I remember when I was first taught that, I thought, like, why in the world would you call that C a B sharp? It seems kind of silly. Let's go ahead and listen to the scale. It sounds like this. Nice. Now, in this song, like many songs in harmonic minor, we're going to find that B sharp and B natural. All right. The main chord progression that we have going on in the song is a 1, 6, 4, 5. That may sound familiar because we've seen that in a bunch of other songs. It's a harmony or a harmonic progression that we seem to like a lot. In this song, that's a C sharp minor, an A major, an F sharp minor, followed by a G sharp major, again made possible by that leading tone, the raised seventh. Sounds like this. Cool. Let's fly through this breakdown. I really want to keep these as digestible as possible because I think like just the term music theory sounds so difficult, scientific. It's really not that complicated. We take that chord progression that we just saw. This is the pluck instrument, the most predominant thing. All right, it's the same chord progression I just said, the 1, the 6, the 4, and the 5. The only additional piece of information is how this is basically attacked. When I showed you the notes before, they were 3-note chords. These are the same 3 notes, only you see one of those notes happening twice. We get the low note and then the top 2 notes from the chord with the main note added an octave above. And that same style of playing the chord is applied to each of those chords. The more music you make, the more you'll recognize that patterns are really like integral portions of music. Even a scale fundamentally is a pattern. The second layer that we have, a pitched layer, we have a talking bass that's basically doubling up that root note with the second time the chords hit. If I were to solo that section, it sounds like this. Not too much on its own, but it layers up well with the pluck. Cool. All right. Now, before I go into the stuff you see on the right, let's talk about the drums. Again, Noisia is a prolific trio. That word prolific, like, don't really want to throw that out with too many musicians and producers, but like their music is really timeless, and that's why I would basically call Noisia prolific. They're one of the things that makes their style so organic, even though it's electronic music. All of it involves electronics, but it feels organic, human. Part of that is from the drum programming. So the drums are not perfectly on the grid. It's basically like a kick on the 1, a kick on the 2, or before the 2. It's like a 16th note triplet ahead, less than a 30-second note. So kind of out of time. We get a snare that happens with the kick, but not exactly with the kick. Together, those create what's called a flam sound. That's like in drumming when one stick hits before another stick. So it's like, we call that a flam. And then we have basically a clap, series of clap and hi-hats happening on a standard backbeat. That's beat 2 and 4. You're seeing some doubling, so I could get the clap sound as full as the original. The hi-hat has a delay on it, an 8th note triplet delay. Altogether, the drums sound like this. So you can probably hear just from listening to the drums, there's a lot of quirky or like glitching type groove to it. That's created or is possible from the slightly out of time stuff. Then we get this secondary, basically some crash cymbals and a delayed like hi-hat sound. Those sound like this. Now, one interesting thing you heard in the crash, you may have noticed how it pitched down at the second one. I'm using Sound Shifter by Waves, but to automate that line to go down, after the first of each group. And it sounds to me like that is what Noisia is doing. And again, they use so much like outboard gear that this could very well have been made on a drum machine. And then, for instance, they could have just like cranked a pitch envelope down on, say, a crash. It's kind of how I picture that being made. But anyway, let's go into the lead. So after the 4-bar intro, I should mention we're at 74 beats per minute. We could have done this at 148 beats per minute. That's 74 times 2. There is no difference between those two ways of doing it. All the notes are the same. It would just be like double the length. So the way I have it, it's a 4-bar intro. If we were in 148, we call it an 8-bar intro. But anyway, after 4 measures in my session, we get our main lead. The lead is somewhat simple, uses 4 notes. The notes are C sharp, the 1, D sharp, the 2, E, the 3, and then B sharp or C, that raised 7th scale tone. It's happening basically an arpeggio. So like you could remember the chords that we have here. The chord was a C sharp minor. We get C sharp and E in that chord. We then got an A major here. We have A, C sharp, and E in that chord. So those notes work again. The next one, we get an F sharp minor chord. So the minor 4, we drop down to the D sharp. This really just creates dissonance. We already have the minor 4. On top of that, this is basically like a 6th of that minor. So it's like a minor 6 there. And then finally, we get that raised scale tone because that's in our chord, the G sharp minor hitting there. So let's play. I'll play it from the beginning of that. Let's hear what that sounds like. Cool. There's some subtle other elements happening. I have my choir doubling up on the lead. That's really like subtle in the background. We have a pad that's doing the chord progression, only it's doing those chords on half notes, so holding them instead of the full pattern. That makes the music kind of like brighten up slightly there. Then we have our main choir layer. We're going to see this a lot more in the second drop and second verse essentially, but this is doing a C sharp minor arpeggio. So it's taking the 1 chord and basically doing that same thing. One important element is that there's a pitch bend on the first note. So instead of just being G sharp, E, C, it's kind of going G sharp, bending up to essentially the A, which is still in our key. The choir is pretty subtle in the track. It's got a lot of reverb on. It's kind of in the background, but it serves a lot. It helps to kind of like add for development. All right. One of the main elements you're probably here to see is the famous string breakdown. So these strings are very cinematic. Another thing that's unique to Noisia, this string section, which is 4 measures as you see it written before you, the way I did it, but it's unique because this takes the place of a build-up. A lot of this style of music has the build-ups that we know, like the really common sound effects that increase in speed or go up in pitch. This is really more like the music itself functions like that, which to me, from a composition standpoint, is super cool. So let's play it, then I'll show you the chords first. So we start with the C sharp minor. We go to the same second chord we have, which would be the A major. Only we're adding a G sharp on top. That makes it a major 7. Same harmony, but slightly cooler. We're still going to an F sharp minor next in the bass. The first time we basically get B and F sharp doubled up. That's kind of reminiscent of the major 7 that would happen in the original key. Then we go to the full F sharp minor chord. Then we get G sharp in the bass, the 5. On the top, we're basically getting a G sharp, a B, and a G sharp. All right, so C sharp, G sharp, B. That's kind of like a minor seventh, if we would, on the 1 chord in inversion. Minor seventh, second inversion. Lots of fancy stuff. Basically, that note, getting the B natural, helps to kind of establish the fact that whether we're going to call this a minor seventh or we're going to call this a minor 5, we get the note that is in natural minor. So again, not the B sharp, but the B natural. Having that happen here makes it so that it's even darker or more epic when we get the final B sharp here. Finally, we get a 3 chord. This is an E major in first inversion. And then finally, it's going to be this G sharp major chord made possible by that B sharp, the C, which is right there, which again is in what makes this song harmonic minor. So let's hear that while we watch. Cool. So the that major 5 chord is really like impactful because we don't hear that like full harmony until that point in the song. It's somewhat dissonant, but works really well to be like the last thing before this drop. We hear that dominant chord and then we're in the drop. Listen to this. All right, so let's go through this drop. Now, I'm going to mainly talk about the music theory stuff, the notes that's happening. I did build these sounds, so I'm thinking I'll do a breakout video kind of covering the sounds. I'll show you them really quickly, but my goal is to mainly talk about the theory. So super simple music-wise in the drop, we're basically doing the same progression we were C sharp, A, F sharp to G sharp. One difference is that we're going to the 6, back to the 6 as a passing tone. We then repeat that twice, so 8 measures on the C sharp. And this is really why I wanted to choose Tommy's theme. This is an example of something that sounds super cool and is somewhat wrong, but like there's nothing wrong in music. Like whatever we like the sound of is right. But I'll explain what I mean. So the song is in C sharp minor here, and then all of a sudden, with no real transition notes or anything, it just jumps up to a minor third, up to E minor. All right. So it jumps up a minor third, but instead of the C sharp minor chord, we're basically it jumps up to the key of E minor. That's what I was calling it before. So the same exact progression that we're doing here, where this was the 1 chord, right? The 1 note, we're moving everything up. Now this becomes 1 note. All right, we could use the same music theory principles to call this progression, like the 1, 6, 4, 5, back up to 6. Basically the same stuff, just moved up. Now, that sounds dissonant. I used the word wrong before. Some people might say like wrong notes sound dissonant. That's one way of understanding like dissonance. But really, in practice, they basically like do this super cool sound design. They do 2 times of it, and then out of nowhere, it jumps up to be in the key of E minor. Then it jumps back down to C sharp minor, and then jumps back up to E minor. So it does it twice. I can't, off the top of my head, think of another hit dance record that does that, honestly. So you might try that. You could like do a drop halfway through, just grab all the notes and like move them up, and that's going to sound crazy and dark. And if that's what you're going for, there's an example of how you use some knowledge to facilitate like what you're trying to do. Again, we don't need music theory to explain that, but it's just another way of understanding something we can understand with our ears. All right, drum-wise, this is a more straightforward drum section. We basically have kick, snare, kick on 1, snare on 2, kick on 3, snare on 4. The second measure and every other measure, it does a kick on the 1, kick on the 4th 16th note. We could call this like a dotted 8th tied to a 16th note. We're really getting crazy with the rhythms, but that basically repeats. In the cymbals, we have standard quarter note cymbals happening for the C sharp minor part. Then for the E minor part, we have the same kick and snare pattern happening, but we get the cymbals picking up. The rhythm is basically an 8th note followed by 2 16th notes, 8th note, 2 16th notes. The way I would count that is 1 and a 2 and a 3 and a 4. All of that. Let's just solo out our drums so we can hear that. Sound like this. The faster cymbal. Again, the drums really don't even sound that interesting on their own, but that's because all of this music is really about the sound design. And let's go through some of the sound design. So I'm calling this Noisia-ish bass and Noisia-ish lead, just for fun. So the main first bass that happens on the 1, playing our root notes, is 2 oscillators. I am using both of them. Got a Cymatics FM table 12, 40, 88. I then am using FM from B. It's my warp menu, and basically that's FMing from this B oscillator, and that basically works to give it that growl sort of sound to it. Then I'm using LFO1 to control the change of that FM. Then the really important thing to this bass sound is taking the distortion, I have it on Seinfeld, and literally tying this to the drive. If I solo out this bass and we turn that off, it's not even going to sound recognizable. So let's turn off the distortion. Sounds like this. Pretty static. Here's with the distortion. Again, not a ton of movement in the drive, but that, you probably heard it, was enough. So I'm using a hyper dimension expander, the mix also moving, so we hear more of the 4 voices. At the same time, the distortion gets heavier. So that's the fundamentals of the first sound, and then the second sound is pretty similar. The main difference is that instead of hearing oscillator B, we're just using it to FM. All right, so this is an important thing to have, but we're not actually hearing this. We're just hearing it change our first oscillator here. All right, then LFO1 is controlling our wavetable position. FM from B, we're using a different wavetable. It's Demon by Cymatics. And then we have the filter. And an interesting thing about this is we actually filter the oscillator we're not even hearing, which does change the way that FM works. So basically I have it on flange minus. On A and B, the mix is turned pretty down. The cutoff is getting controlled by the same parameter. The speed, the rate of LFO1 is actually out of time. It's 0.2 hertz. Basically, a lot of the other basses that you see in this song, I'm going to be changing the rate there. And then finally, we've got our LFO1 controlling our filter, so low pass filter, and that's what makes that talk. Let's hear this bass on its own. All right, the other main thing that you're hearing is LFO2. So LFO2 is tied to the rhythm. It's a half note. It's an upsloping ramp, and it is controlling our hyperdimension expander mix, just like our LFO1 on the other sound I showed you was doing. And then we also have the phaser turned on. We have no phasing happening at the very beginning of this sound. And then over the course of the half note, it increases. That's kind of like the metallic sound that you're hearing. don't know if metallic is the right word for how you're hearing it, but that's responsible for the changes. Cool. So everything else you see here is basically as it says, lead variation. So I duplicated the one I just showed you and changed it in some way. I changed it by like the speed that it was working, maybe added, like in the case of this bass, I added some automation to happen. No, I just changed the rate on that one. There's a bass at the beginning of drop 2 that sounds like this. And that's basically created on the first serum patch I showed you. I have the LFO1 is changed. The oscillators are the same. The shape is controlling some of the other stuff. We've added in more voices on oscillator A. There's a detune that LFO is controlling. One of the main things it's doing to create the sound of the stutter is turning the volume on and off. We then are by we, I mean me, but I like saying we. It sounds more like I represent the company. But I have it automating the speed down here of this LFO. So if you watch this knob right here, it's going to move. So that's the speed of the wobble. Now, the only thing else I want to mention, because again, I want to keep these pretty, I use the word digestible for you, is we're going to talk about the arrangement and finally the choir layer. So I already showed you this section right here where it's doing a C sharp minor arpeggio. We have the pitch bend automation, super important for the sound here happening. But one of the kind of cool things about the song, the development of it, is we start to get it in octaves, right? So it's even bigger than it was before. I have 2 different choirs doing it here. So it starts to be even more noticeable. They're pretty wet with reverb, again, really atmospheric. And then in drop 2, we get that new sound effect to start, the new bass. But then we also get the choir involved where we didn't get it on drop 1. The first time we hear the choir, it's happening on that E minor arpeggio. So it's moved up a third, just like everything else. It's kind of interesting because we don't expect to hear it on the drop, and then we hear the choir at the weird section. So you could think of that as like making it even weirder for the moment. And then finally, we have some different lead variations, which I'm going to do a breakout video where I cover how I built those basses more in depth. So hopefully you found this video helpful. If you did, you would help me out a ton by subscribing to the channel. Hit that bell for notifications so you find out when I make a new video. And I hope this shed light on a song that like mesmerized me for many years and still mesmerizes me. That is Tommy's Theme by Noisia. Make sure you go support Noisia, listen to their music. Unfortunately, they retired or disbanded the alias a couple years ago. But if you watch this, any of you Noisia members, you've been incredibly influential on me, and I'm sure many of the people watching. So have a great day. Keep making music. Be kind to your fellow human being, and I'll see you guys next time. Cheers.